I didn't need to find this record. To be honest, I don't even know if the file still officially exists. Everything related to this was either deleted, archived, inaccessible, or lost due to dead links and abandoned servers. Most people who talk about this topic on the internet are only talking about fragments, screenshots without timestamps, forum posts of users who disappeared years ago, or corrupted audio recordings that are probably fake. However, a few months ago, while researching old NASA deep space communication archives, I came across something strange. Reference code 84-047A. At first, it seemed unimportant. NASA used thousands of archive identifiers in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Satellite telemetry, lunar mapping projects, failed transmissions, and most of the calibration records were unrelated to anything unusual. However, no classification had been added to this file. There is no project name, no assigned engineer, and no task source. Just for a while, 1 minute and 17 seconds. Even this alone wasn't strange. The strange thing was that multiple archive systems gave the file different names. A database that labels this as signal recovery. Someone else labeled him the unresolved source. And a third system, allegedly copied from a decommissioned NASA server in the late 90s, had only "do not repeat" written on it. That's when I realized this wasn't just an ordinary archive corruption. Someone had deliberately altered the metadata, and people only do this when they don't want something to be tracked. I began to investigate more deeply. Today, most NASA systems are quite organized, but the old archives were chaotic. In the early days of computing, backups were constantly copied between different facilities. Sometimes files persist in forgotten backup systems long after they have been deleted. Apparently, the same thing happened here too. In an old university network snapshot from 1997, a partial text record referring to the recording was found. There was no audio file, there was only a transfer report. The report states that the record was briefly viewed during internal archive synchronization in July 1984. It was uploaded by mistake. It remained visible for approximately 47 minutes. Then it was removed. No explanation was given. What bothered me wasn't the deletion process. Sensitive files are always deleted. What bothered me was the response. According to the records, engineers requested emergency cleaning operations on multiple systems at the same time. This level of urgency usually indicates one of two things. Either the material is hidden, or there is a big problem. For weeks, I couldn't find anything else. Then I discovered a forum thread from 2006, a small website. I was almost abandoned. Only 6 responses. A user claiming to be a retired radio technician wrote the following: "I listened to part of the recording once. After that, no one in the room spoke." This sentence remained in my mind because it did not sound exaggerated. He seemed uncomfortable. The user never shared again. The account was deleted 2 months later. That's when I became obsessed at that point. I was so curious about what was in that recording that I started contacting people associated with old aviation communication systems. Most ignored me. One person responded, an old contractor, full name unknown. They agreed to communicate only via email. He claimed that the recordings were made during a deep space monitoring operation related to experimental signal analysis. It was not a mission. There were no astronauts either. It was just passive listening. According to him, NASA was occasionally monitoring unexplained radio anomalies, originating beyond standard satellite ranges. Most of these were meaningless. Static interference, solar-induced interference, distorted echoes reflected from the Earth's atmosphere. However, sometimes certain patterns emerged. Apparently, this is what sets 84-047A apart. The contractor stated that the signal is structured, not random noise, not natural repetition, structured. He said analysts initially believed the recording contained fragmented human voice frequencies hidden beneath layers of interference. At first glance, this sounds ridiculous. Human voices appear randomly in the background noise everywhere. This is called auditory pareidolia. The brain desperately wants chaos to become meaningful. But then it mentions something disturbing. It is reported that the frequencies recur at mathematically consistent intervals. It's almost perfect. Natural parasites don't usually behave this way, especially in deep space environments. I asked him if the recording was still available. After that, he stopped responding. 3 days later, the email address completely disappeared. Maybe this is a coincidence. Perhaps not. Finally, I managed to obtain a version reconstructed from surviving fragments found on the internet. I have to make this very clear. No one knows if this restructuring is real or not. It could easily have been made up, but if it's fake, someone has gone to extraordinary lengths to make it believable. The recording starts almost silently, just a faint electrical hum, the kind that outdated analog systems take out. Then gradually sizzle appears in the background. At first it's mild, almost imperceptibly mild. It's like a distant radio conversation that's been buried underwater. Nothing obvious happens for the first 20 seconds. I think it's a deliberate thing. Silence creates tension. You are constantly waiting for something. Then the first anomaly appears, a low-frequency pulse that repeats every 7 seconds. Perfectly consistent, not drifting, not fluctuating, exact repetition. I analyze the waveform myself. The intervals are unnervingly clean, too clean. At around 31 seconds, another sound fades in beneath the static. This is where most people become uncomfortable listening to it because the sound resembles breathing. Not loud breathing, distant breathing, mechanical, slow, almost exhausted. I know how that sounds. And honestly, I tried convincing myself it was just overlapping tape noise. But the rhythm changes when isolated. Tape hiss doesn't inhale, at least not like this. Then comes the part almost everyone online talks about. 43 seconds into the recording, the waveform changes abruptly. The static narrows. Background frequencies suddenly align into organized bands. The signal becomes clearer, focused, like something locking onto a transmission. And underneath it, there's something that almost sounds like speech. Not actual words. Fragments. Broken syllables. A voice trying to emerge through interference. I spent hours slowing the segment down, frame by frame. At one point I thought I heard a phrase. I'm not going to repeat it because the more times I listened, the less certain I became. And uncertainty is somehow worse. One detail nearly everyone overlooks is the timestamp embedded inside the metadata. July 18th, 1984. 2:17 and 43 seconds in the morning. That timestamp should have ended the mystery immediately. Except there's a problem. The formatting attached to it didn't exist in NASA archival systems during 1984. It matches formatting standards introduced years later, which means one of 3 possibilities is true. The file was modified afterward, the recovered metadata is fake, or the timestamp wasn't generated in 1984 at all. That realization changed everything for me because suddenly the question wasn't, what did NASA record? The question became, when was this actually recorded? I kept searching, and eventually I found the strangest detail of all. A scanned internal memorandum recovered from a university archive project. Most of the document had been censored completely. Entire paragraphs blacked out, names removed, locations erased, but one sentence remained visible. Just one. Playback resulted in severe auditory discomfort among monitoring staff. No further explanation, no signatures, no attached report. Only a red classification stamp across the bottom corner. Classified. I tried tracing the source document. It no longer exists. The archive page hosting the scan vanished 2 weeks after I downloaded it. Maybe coincidence, but by then I'd stopped believing in coincidences surrounding this file. Then something happened. I still can't explain. While analyzing the reconstructed audio with spectral enhancement software, I isolated a hidden frequency buried beneath the recording. It lasted less than a second, almost inaudible, but when slowed down, it resembled a human voice, extremely distorted, like speech stretched through layers of machinery. I boosted the signal repeatedly, trying to understand it. Each playback sounded different. Sometimes it resembled whispering. Other times it sounded almost electronic. But one thing remained consistent. There was emotion in it. Fear. Not anger, not aggression. Fear. That disturbed me more than anything else because if the recording is authentic, then whatever produced the sound wasn't trying to attack anyone. It was trying to communicate, and maybe failing. There's one final detail I haven't mentioned yet: the direction of the signal. Most people assume the recording came from deep space. That's what I believed too, until I found an old antenna alignment report connected to the same time period. According to the surviving coordinates, NASA's deep space receivers weren't facing outward that night. They were pointed toward a much closer target. Not Mars, not deep space, the Moon. And if that's true, then whatever produced the recording wasn't far away at all, which raises a much more uncomfortable possibility. Maybe the signal didn't travel across the universe. Maybe it was already here,